On August 15, 2026, two orbital rockets ignited their engines and left the pad. They didn't launch on different days, or even in different hours. They lifted off exactly 38 minutes apart, from opposite sides of the United States. Launching a single rocket requires an immense operational footprint, tracking weather, clearing ranges, and managing telemetry. Entering the terminal countdown for a second mission, while the first is still actively climbing toward orbit, presents a high-stakes logistical puzzle. The only way to execute this overlap without a catastrophic crossover is to ensure the two events never actually touch. SpaceX did not run one massive consolidated mission. They ran two completely independent operational architectures concurrently. This 38-minute gap acts as a stress test for a system designed to treat space access not as a bespoke, isolated spectacle, but as a standardized and highly coordinated routine. Space Launch Complex 40 in Florida and SLC-4E in California are separated by 2,500 miles. Despite identical hardware, each coast relies on independent ground crews, weather networks, and dedicated ranges. Their data streams feed into isolated mission control nodes. This geographic separation, combined with rigid standardization, serves as the primary safeguard against any operational interference between the two missions. The first countdown concluded on the East Coast. The payload was a commercial batch of 9 replenishment satellites for the Globalstar 2R communications constellation. At 9:12 p.m. Eastern Time, flight-proven booster B1090-14 ignited from Florida's Space Launch Complex 40, beginning its 14th trip to space. Following stage separation, the second stage continued toward orbit, while the first stage immediately reoriented itself. It used cold gas thrusters to perform a mid-air backflip, pointing its engines back toward the Florida coastline. Returning to the launch site requires 3 distinct engine firings. The boost back burn halts downrange momentum, the entry burn slows the vehicle as it re-enters the atmosphere, and the landing burn brings the stage to a controlled hover over the pad. 8 minutes after liftoff, the booster touched down at landing zone 40. By returning directly to land, the Florida team rapidly secured their vehicle. This allowed autonomous flight software to take full control of the coasting upper stage as the mission transitioned into its orbital phase. While Florida's upper stage was drifting silently through the vacuum of orbit, the California team entered their own terminal countdown. The West Coast payload was USSF-366, a classified mission for the United States Space Force. At 6:50 p.m. Pacific Time, exactly 38 minutes after the Florida launch, booster B1088-18 ignited its engines at Vandenberg Space Force Base. Mission parameters for the Space Force required a different recovery profile. Instead of returning to the launch site, California utilized a downrange landing. This maritime recovery relied on an entirely separate fleet. Tugs and support ships managed the autonomous spaceport drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, positioned hundreds of miles out in the Pacific Ocean. Executing a land recovery and a sea recovery simultaneously is possible because the tracking software and human operations for each coast are firewalled from one another. With the California boosters secured at sea, the Florida upper stage completed its coast and prepared for the final deployment sequence. The satellites reached their target altitude of 1,410 kilometers, successfully deploying into the Globalstar constellation. The 2 boosters recovered during this doubleheader had flown 14 and 18 times respectively, highlighting the high-volume reuse that makes this cadence possible. For decades, a single launch commanded an agency's undivided attention and a bespoke set of hardware. The 38-minute gap shows a departure from that singular focus. This double-header served as a stress test for parallel architecture, demonstrating that autonomous software can manage the complex physics of 2 missions at once. Space access is no longer restricted to one location at a time. It is a distributed infrastructure, defined by simultaneous execution across 2 coasts. Thanks for watching Cosmora HQ. If you want more deep dives into the operational mechanics of spaceflight, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications.